Dr. John King, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you
Hello,
for
mate.
joining.
How you going?
Doing well. I appreciate you reaching out and wanting to do this with me. I'm looking forward to our conversation. There's a lot of layers of trauma, but even resilience in your story and growth. And I'm hoping we'll touch on all of that. But before we jump into our conversation today, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what's brought you here today in the current chapter of your life.
Thanks, man. That's very generous. So I was trafficked as a boy by the woman who raised me and her girlfriends, predominantly equal opportunity victim, both men and women, but predominantly it was female sexual abuse. And I had recall of that back in 2008. And so this journey has been fraught with a lack of resources, understanding, empathy, because this is 15, 16 years ago. There was nothing about the sexual abuse of men, particularly by women. It wasn't a conversation we're having. We were unfortunately comfortable, we still are today, talking about the sexual abuse or trafficking of women and girls, yet we forget the other 50%. And the
Mhm.
statistics aren't accurate. There is not 1 in 6 boys sexually abused. Everything else, everything that's come to light in 2024, 2025, so it's about 50%. And I've spent some time in the anti-trafficking space, tail end of the Epstein case, the Nygaard case. 45% of the people involved who were trafficking were women.
Mm.
So we're not having these conversations. So in my arc, I started off wanting to help people like me, and I did, and actively involved in some anti-trafficking stuff. But then it came to a place where I realized that the greatest need in my own life was recovery. And so I not only moved my inner focus, because I think at this first stage of anyone who's dealing with trauma or a life change is they feel that the best thing they can do to get better is to help others get better, which was just nonsense.
Mm.
And so when I went through that phase of doing the work to try and help others, I was okay with that. But what I realized I needed to spend time, more time focused on my recovery. So the last 15 years, I've had the privilege, and it has been a privilege, of taking that amount of time and about $300,000 and spending it on recovery.
Mm.
And so I'm in a phase of life and my journey now where I want to give that back. I want to find a way, and we have found a way, we believe, to build an online community that helps people confront trauma, big T or little t, if you're a believer in those sorts of things,
Yeah.
and in performance mindset, because I don't know anyone who's been through extreme trauma who doesn't want their life to be meaningful on the other side of this thing.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing all of that. Are you able to talk about your trauma a little bit more to give us some context? I know you talked about the trafficking piece, and I think it's important to dive into that a little bit, just even though if it can be uncomfortable for some people to hear, because it ties into what you're talking about also is why there isn't enough focus on men experiencing sexual abuse.
Mm.
And one of the things I often see, unfortunately, is it can be mocked or there are jokes around it, right? I
Yeah,
wish that happened to
I
me,
wish
right?
that happened to me, and did you
Yeah.
really enjoy that? Like, oral sex with the woman who raised you at 4 should be enjoyable. I like, in what universe is that acceptable? Or
Mm.
why would that be enjoyable? Why wouldn't that just be so if the roles were reversed by anybody, it would be, and I this happened to me. I had a guy, I was talking to a guy, and he found me sorry. He said, "Man, that bad for you." Yeah, something like that happened to me, but it's no big deal. I said, "What do you mean it's no big deal?" My babysitter, every time she'd come round, I was a little boy, she'd give me a head job. I said, "Well, how old were you?" "Oh, 5 or 6." It didn't mean anything. I said, "Hang on. If that was your daughter," he had a daughter who was 7 or 8 at the time, "and that happened to her, what," and you saw he just raged. I said, "That's right, because you can see the damage it would happen to her, but you've been trained not to see the damage that's had happened to you."
Mm.
And so in my experience, it was I was made to perform sexual acts at home. I did that in order to keep my sister safe. Even as a young man, as a child, I knew that my role was to protect my little sister. And I was taken to parties. I was trained to be good at sexual acts, and I was filmed, movies were made, all that sort of stuff. So there was this whole thing that happened that for me, it was just my childhood. I had nothing else to compare it with. And the one occasion, I think I was 7, I ran away from home to tell the neighbor what was going on. Something was happening at the house at the time. She literally beat me, slapped me across the head, and grabbed me by my ear and dragged me back, saying, "No woman would ever do that to her son." And that was probably 40 years before I told my story to somebody else.
Mm.
And so I think all of those things sit around the topic, and all of those things are pervasive, and all of those things limit real and honest conversations.
So I can appreciate why that experience at the age of 7 where you weren't heard or understood because your truth was denied. And then you said it was another 40 years before you opened up again. What did you do for those 40 years? How did you live your life? How did you compartmentalize the trauma and just continue to just live and move on? Like, how was that? And what were some of the challenges you had of keeping it all in?
I don't know if I realized what I'd been through. I don't think I understood it. For me, it was just like, little old 8 millimeter frames of movies that were single instances that floated around inside my brain. And in 2008, when I had recall, they all strung together and started to play continuously. And
Mm,
they didn't stop for about 7 years. Sometimes they still do play. But that was the point where I stopped and I had to say, hang on, this isn't just one or two things, because I'm intelligent enough to understand memory. I'm articulate enough to put my words around, man, this seems a bit odd. And you can justify the ones and the twos when one flashes up and you go, no, what's that crap? And you put it away. No, what's that crap? And different one, put it away. But when they all play and they play continuously and they play in this monologue, it's, oh shit, what happened? That's not right. And I remember I said it once, I'm a victim of sexual abuse. That was
mm.
the only time I think I used the term victim. But what I did is I was able to put my handle around it and say, this is what's happened to me. Up until that point, there was no connect for me. Now, in terms of life, that's a very interesting question. So in my own coming to terms with this thing, I've seen things as incidences and episode. An incident is something that happened to me. I'm not coping. There's a smell, there's a situation. I don't cope. An episode is when it gets verbal and it becomes an impactful to other people around me at home or at work or other places. And in retrospect, what happened is it went from being the majority of incidences to the majority of episodes.
Mm,
And those episodes became more and more frequent. They went from once or twice a year to once or twice a quarter to once or twice a month to
mm,
weekly, 2 or 3 times a week. And then the shit just hit the fan and everything came back.
mm,
And so I think there was this decline in my brain's willingness to pass this stuff off. And I've found that it often happens, and we speak to this, is often happens in men between 35 and 45. Sometimes it gets tagged in the whole midlife crisis thing. It gets washed in the whole suicide thing. All gets washed in here. But when you really have an opportunity to go back and it's, brother, you've been dragging this shit around for 45 years and your brain's just saying, dude, if we're going to go forward together, you
mm.
just got to deal with this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you can continue to ignore that call
Uh-huh.
and the message just keeps getting louder and louder. Right. So to me,
Right.
what I'm hearing from you is there was like you said, these episodes were becoming frequent. So there wasn't like one specific trigger where it all came. It was just a buildup over time where you're
There,
like, okay, yeah.
there actually was, mate. It was daffodils. Believe it or not, daffodils. Growing up, there was a lady, Mrs. McGregor, lived probably 4 or 5 doors down next block. She had this bunch of these beautiful purple plum trees, those fat, juicy plums that get in springtime. And underneath those plum trees, she'd planted daffodils.
Mm.
So when the nights were too long and horrible, and I used to walk myself to school, it was about 4 miles or so, and I would walk past Mrs. McGregor's house, and every springtime, those daffodils would come up, and I would say, I only understand this in retrospect, I would say, "I made it 1 more year. I made it 1 more year. I made it 1 more year." In 2008, it was about 10:45 Thursday morning, I walked outside and the sky was beautiful blue, puffy white clouds like a Simpsons opening, and I remember looking at there going, "Wow, what a beautiful day," and I looked down and I said to myself, "Those daffodils are beautiful." And then it
Mm.
happened. Boom.
Mm.
Everything came flooding back. And that led to that's the start of what my internal marketing department is called, John Ageddon. That's where my whole world imploded, and I literally went from right brain, goal oriented, driven to wanting to smoke a cigar and write poetry. My brain was just done. Dude, you got to work this stuff out, man. Get about it.
Mm.
So yeah, it was that one instance, and it was total, like instant onset of. I'm obviously, I believe I had CPTSD before that, but
Mhm.
bro, it was chronic stutter. Had to close down my worldwide travel business and consultancy. I was a total lock in, and it was a cluster.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. Tell me more about smoking cigars and writing poetry. What is that like?
It's awesome. Man, my first poem was one called Rain, which outlined what happened to me as a scout camp as a boy. And I hated the rain. I've always been fearful of rain, and I never understood why. And so part of this was an attempt to articulate things. And at that stage, I had tried to find therapy and counseling. I had run local church groups, I'd run rape support groups, I'd run various things and been told that I was a predator, not a victim. I
Mm.
wanted to come and prey on these poor women, and rape doesn't happen to men like you. And that one little receptionist at the church, it wasn't my finest hour. I told her where very clearly to place her point of view. And it was not my best moment, brother. Best moment. And so what I did is what I suppose I've always done is fuck it, I'm gonna solve it. And
Mhm.
I drew myself a Venn diagram of the behavior traits that I was having a challenge with. And then I found where they were overlapping. And my thought was Pareto principle, 20/80 rule. If I can change these 20% of behavior patterns, it's going to impact 80% of my life.
Mm.
Where for the next 5 years, I went about reading everything I could on that 20%. I went back to the Napoleonic War, which is the first mention of the heart murmur and PTSD, into the Civil War. And by then, we're coming out of the 80s and
Mhm.
we're not being open yet about combat PTSD, but we're starting to have conversations on the fringes about this thing called the heart murmur or cowardness and general patterns encounter in World War II in the movie pattern, which shows him beating the daylights out of some cowardly guys, soldiers, was very telling moment in the change in the American military psyche and understanding that there is an impact for this war.
Mm.
And so I remember watching it going, what the? And that's when I started to go down that veteran angle. And all of these pieces came together because I said a couple of hundred books.
Mm.
And I just started to, I was going to have to dig my way out. There was no one. There was no one. I couldn't
Mm.
find anyone to talk to about it.
Mhm.
And I found a therapist about 5, 6 years in, and
Mm.
I was ready for a therapist at that point. I had done everything that I could do personally, and I just needed someone to give me tools for my toolbox.
Mm.
And so I found someone, was able to
Yeah.
find.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. So the other thing you'd shared with me was the in terms of the trafficking piece and the whole notion of taking from another person, the lust and the taking. Are you able to explain that a bit more in terms of what you've observed in the work you're doing and including it in yourself? What does it mean to take from another person, as obvious as it seems, but
Uh,
someone who was on the receiving end of it?
I think one of the best definitions I've I've heard and I've worked with is Love is the satisfaction of others at the expense of self because love desires to give.
Mm,
Lust is the satisfaction of self at the expense of others because lust desires to get.
mm,
And in any aspect of a relationship, there is always the battle between love and lust. Am I going to make myself and my own needs the focus, or will I make the focus of others? And I think in any loving long term relationship, it's a battle to outlove each other, preferring one another in love, wanting to give and outgive. So you're in this constant one upmanship. I know with my wife, Melissa, if I say I love you to her, I'll go, I win. I said it first today. And so it's just a dumb game that we play. It's one of those dumb marriage things that just keeps it in the forefront of your mind. And I think when, as a society, we become so focused on self and the accumulation of things that don't matter, because we put store on replaceable things. We don't put weight on irreplaceable things. We can't replace our health, our relationship, our mind, our eyesight. We
mm,
can't replace those things, but we can replace a car, a home, a house, all that. So we've got a whole society which is really putting weight on wrong things.
mm,
And how you measure your success with that weight is by comparison to someone else. So you've got a whole, we've got a whole world now, particularly the Western world, which is weighted accordingly to the stuff I have has to be better than the stuff you have, which is dumb because at some point you'll always meet someone else with better stuff.
mm,
And it's only by lusting after that and wanting to satisfy that yourself. And you don't care what you do to get it.
mm,
Take that into a sexual arena.
mm,
When sex is predicated upon getting something, getting satisfaction, getting control, having control, then it morphs and warps into something that's pretty insidious, I've found.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And when you and I had chatted last time, we talked about this whole, the way I see it, you can tie it to lust or the need for more, especially when it comes to materialistic things. They can become base desires. And for me, it's been, in order to transcend that, I've looked at, okay, what's my existence in this world, in this life, and what happens after, and how do I tie to that, knowing that this, I know for a fact, comes to an end at some point, and that keeps me grounded. But do you think that's what's missing when people are falling prey to their base desires, whether it's lust or some of the other materialistic desires you were referring to?
I think so, mate. I strongly agree with you on that. If this is all there is, then I want to dominate and get as much as I can.
Mm,
But if this is prelude to a greater love, I'm a Christian man, so
yeah.
that's my
Yes.
framework. If this is a prelude to a greater love and a greater experience,
Hmm.
then this is a preparation for, not the end of.
Right.
So my goal is to actually have a positive encounter wherever possible, except on Highway 114 during peak hour, because God Himself gives me grace for that. Except on that. But as I'm going through this, I've learnt, and this sincerely, I've learnt that the kinder I am to others is one of the most selfish thing I can do.
Mm,
Because the more grace and mercy I expend, the more I reap, the calmer I am, the less negative my day. I suppose, to be honest, I try and spend my time walking through life being the most selfish person I know and reaping the rewards for that grace and kindness that I try and extend.
yeah. You must, I think, in order to get there, I think you must experience that grace and kindness yourself to be able to feel it.
I absolutely, brother.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this brings me to your question, like the question around, what do you do for your mental health, like yourself, and how has faith helped you navigate that?
I I never prayed and asked, why did this happen to me? I
Mm,
only ever asked that He would turn all things around for good.
mm,
So eliminating that starting point of victim, I think, has been essential. So my first encounter, spiritual encounter, I was very young. And so I've always had this awareness of the creator, always had the, and walked You can't run from the palm of God. Like, it's eternal. So I've tried my best just to realize that I'm still on there. So at some point I had to give up trying to escape and try then to work out what that looks like and what does this mean. Now, it doesn't come without its struggle.
Mm,
It doesn't come without wondering, what the hell? What could my life have looked like if I didn't have to overcome this? I lost my marriage and estranged from my children because I had recall of this.
mm,
I wonder what it comes with all those questions, but there's this overarching acceptance that there will come a day, as we talked about, I'll cross over and I'll look back.
mm,
And the final thread on the tapestry that is my life will be strung. And I'll go, oh, I get it now. And so there's great comfort in that, knowing and acknowledging that there is an overarching person who is caring for me. And even in my darkest times, he was still caring for me. And I think that's always brought comfort.
mm.
And it's just a reality I have. I've always had that reality.
And you talked about recovery and investing in that. What does recovery look like? And is there, I'm assuming there's an overlap here with faith.
Man. Yeah, my faith is all the way through it, brother. Like, it's just, I get up every morning. The 3 C's of my day is Christ, coffee, and cigars. Like, I'm a habitual Bible reader. I'm an habitual talker to God. I'm a habitual smoker of cigars. We get on. Where I come. If I miss one of those 3 things, 2 comes to town. It's no good for me. So I'm sitting on my bed. I had this dream. So this will be a bit weird for whatever, man. I'm just telling you a thing, and you do with what you want to do. I'm coming out of sleep. And I'd seen some miracles. I've seen the most incredible things in my life, mate. Like praying for people, blind eyes opening, people who couldn't walk getting out of which. I mean, dude, New Testament red letter stuff. Like, okay, wow, this stuff's real. And I'm lying there wanting that for myself, realizing that my life has gone to hell, that I'm broken. I can't even work a job. I'm wanting that miracle for myself. And as clear as day, brother, a voice said to me one morning, I am your heavenly father, not your fairy godmother.
Mm,
And every morning, if you'll get up and get a tool for your toolbox, you'll make it.
mm,
And so that was my mission. That's what started me down the path of reading the books. And so that ties in, as you said, spirituality into recovery is you never get over. Maybe let me frame this differently. You will always have to manage something like complex post-traumatic stress. You will always have to manage that.
mhm,
And every day I leave my home, I take my toolbox with me.
mhm,
And I've got like tools in a toolbox. You walk around a house, you need some pliers, you need a spanner. I've got tools that I've come to rely on in that toolbox. I spend a lot of time curating those tools and being aware of those tools. So as I've come down the road in recovery, I'm better at not having to scrub through my toolbox to get the tool. I know the tool I'll need before I get there, and
mhm,
I'll be able to do whatever adjustments I need to. And in a time of crisis, I can go, okay, I need to stop and breathe. I need to tap. I often just tap my leg. EMDR taught me that.
yeah.
I'll go through a cycle of 4-stage breathing or 8 in, 6 out, whatever it is to get my nitrous oxide up. I won't drink alcohol. I won't have sugar. I won't have red food coloring. I will listen to death thrash punk EMDR at the gym, or I won't, because it depends on how. If I find myself in a black t-shirt with a black beanie with black sunglasses at 4 a.m. in the morning, I will put on sugar pop tunes because I don't want to be slashing or beating someone in the car park.
Yeah.
So all of these becomes tools for my
Mhm,
toolbox. And like we're coming up the holiday times, okay? Holiday times. I will always drive a car to an appointment. I will never commit to being more than 45 minutes. I will set a location external to my house so I can always leave and come home to my house. My wife is gloriously flexible,
mhm,
and she understands that if I get to a place and it just ain't going to work because there's too many people, too many drunks, too much, that we're allowed to leave, and there's no condemnation with that.
mm,
So again, all of those are tools for the toolbox. As I'm
mhm,
coming into this, I'm very aware this season's very difficult for me. There were some particular things happening as a kid. It always happened around this time of year. I'm aware that I've just lost 2 brothers this year.
Mm.
I'm aware that I'm carrying grief during this season. So all of these things play. So accordingly, I will see my son and my daughter-in-law Christmas Eve. I'll see my other little girl that I still have a relationship with, and that's it. Everything else is off. I'm home watching Elf.
Yeah. I appreciate all of that. And I think there's a couple of things that you touched on that I wanted to emphasize because as you shared that the CPTSD is something that will always be there. And I think sometimes there's that misconception for people that if I've put in the effort and I've worked through it, that this thing should no longer be there. But I think that's part of your story and you will always need to work through it. And for some people, it can be shame. Shame will creep
Yeah.
up in different ways. To say that I can dispense with it altogether is almost a delusion and you're setting yourself up. And then that brings us back to the tools you talked about, right? Cultivating those tools and relying on them and doing the things you need to do, even when things are going well, because when times are tough, you'll have those habits in place to be able
Yeah,
to
that's
fall
good.
back on.
That's very good. So this year, so I am an Aboriginal, Australian Aboriginal and Brani man, Indigenous. We talked earlier, like the Australian government had a policy of breeding the blackout and they would destroy families, pull them apart. And this went on till 76, 78 as a formal government policy. It's still actually practiced. It's just under a different tag. Still today, my family's been subject to it. And I only reconnected with them 2 years ago. And this year, one brother was murdered for mineral rights to his land. Another brother was put in jail. And another brother died because he couldn't get water to our camp. So here I am going from orphan to tribe, now back to orphan, in total denial of the fact that this had an impact on me. I've
Mhm.
never had a family, was uncomfortable with what that meant, and now I lost them, and all these things and emotions that were starting to grow, man, I closed down. I said, "Done."
Mm.
I've dealt with it. It's fine. Okay. Fast forward to about 6 or 8 weeks ago, totally suicidal, man. I'm sitting on my edge of my bed going, "It's not worth it, man. This is just not." Yeah. Aware that I'm talking in depressed, suicidal thoughts, aware enough because I've put so much time into my toolbox and vulnerable enough to reach over and tap my wife and say, "I'm in a really bad place. I've
Mm.
got to go talk to a mate about this." And here I am. I'm Captain Resilience, Captain Doctor got his shit together guy. Dude, this was like 8 weeks, 8 weeks
Yeah.
ago. If I had brought my own bill of goods that I was beyond recovery, which I think I had, all of a sudden and I go, okay, but now I can rummage through my toolbox. And you know what I forgot? I forgot to go to the gym. I
Mm.
forgot to go to the gym regularly. I had not been disciplined on my diet. I had not been disciplined on the things that I'd watched. So all of a sudden, these incremental things started to kick in, and it's like I'm open and vulnerable.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that awareness is so important because sometimes we lose sight of the small
Yeah,
things
that's
we're
good.
compromising on, and then
Yeah,
to your point, they start adding up, and then we're wondering what's going wrong, right?
that's
So,
very good, mate.
yeah. Now, coming to the work you're doing, you shared that documentary trailer with me, and like you've shared, you wanna be able to normalize your story, remove the stigma, but even talk about some of the challenges around trafficking. How has that been going for you in terms of the work you're doing, and has that helped your own recovery and healing?
Man, do I give the podcast answer or the real one? That's one of those questions, isn't it? So
Keep it real.
it was detrimental, very detrimental early on. The doing the documentary was like a wild hare. I thought they'd use 2 minutes of my story, and they ended up most of that documentary is about my story. And then I went on the road with them for 6 or 7 weeks, showing it at these things all around the country. And out of that, I was replaying this thing every night. Man, it was a kick in the crotch.
Mm.
And but so that's happening. At the same time, there's other beautiful things happening. We'd be in an auditorium with 300 or 400 people, and half are men, maybe a third, at least 100 men a night would come down and form a line just to thank me for telling their story. And they were often standing with their wives and their daughters who'd never heard the fact that this happened to daddy. And so out of that grew the book that I've now got going to publish as a memoir called Deal With It. It's being re-released as a tool to give to other people. And out of that came the second documentary. And out of that came the Phoenix Collective, which is the online community we're building. So all of these things add up, but they've also got a price. And I think I was fully aware that I was making a decision that meant I was going to have to either allow my past to define me or refine me. And the other phrase that I play in my head is turning scars of shame into medal of honor. I have survived this. I've survived this so well. I'm no longer humiliated by this, but I'm proud that I survived this.
Mm.
And when I made that switch internally, it allowed me to embrace these conversations with vigor and I suppose even pride. Not pride in an arrogant sense, but pride in a pat on the back, well done, son sense. And that has been a massive shift. So has this helped in my journey? Yes, but it was never the focus of my journey. I think I find people who'll contact me, they're in recovery 1 or 2 years, and they say, I want to join your foundation. I want to do what you're doing. And I say, okay, then see me in 15 years. Because the fact that you're wanting to do this, 18 months into this, you're nowhere near it. You haven't even started to work on you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And in that, what I'm hearing is courage to be able to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. And my experience with courage has been, it's not always there, right? Like sometimes you'll experience doubt, you'll question yourself. What do you have to say to people that are navigating similar journeys where they're having to speak up or stand for truth, and there's a cost associated with that? You talked about the cost that you were incurring too. How do you navigate those days where you're questioning all of it and doubting yourself and wishing that you could go back to that comfortable, familiar state, even though it was painful?
Yeah, you mean like yesterday? Yeah. So there's a difference between speaking up and speaking out. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Speaking up was what I did when I confronted those people that raised me. Speaking up is what I do if I ask for help from Melissa, my wife. Speaking out is what I do here. I think people confuse the speaking out with the speaking up. Speaking up is John King. Speaking up is me tapping my wife on a Sunday morning at 3 a.m. and saying, babe, for the last 2 weeks, I've been chronically depressed. I haven't told you. I need to tell you now because it's only getting darker. That's speaking up. Speaking out is telling you about it, but I'm only able to tell you about it because I'm 3 months along and I've been doing this for 15 years and I've got a handle on it. I think when people see, one of the dangers I've found is people see something like this and they think, I will know I'm healed if I'm doing something like John's doing. It's not the case. John is doing this now. John, after 15 years, for the last 2 years, John's felt like he's had his feet under him for the first time in his life. 2 years. So it's taken me, I'm 62. It's taken me 60 years to get comfortable with me. And it's taken a lot of tragedy and hard work to get there. So do I hope that I can shorten that cycle for others? Absolutely, I do. I hope that you can, but they've got to track that own journey. So speaking up and speaking out are two different things. I think they should always speak up with humility, with grace, with determination. And that's an inner strength thing that I think we all have to develop. But speaking out is you don't have to. You don't have to enter into that conversation at a party. You don't have to be an advocate for anybody else but yourself. You don't have to. If all you ever did in your life was speak up for your need to get whole and well, and speaking up is maybe having conversations with close friends or encouraging 1 or 2 others,
Mm.
well, you're a champion as far as I'm
Mhm.
concerned.
But isn't there a gift to speaking out, like you said, even though it can seem like there's a heavy price to pay? But you shared earlier that men would come up to you and thank you for the work you were doing. Isn't that a gift of speaking out?
Yeah, it really is, brother. Thank you. Thank you. That's great clarity. I just, I suppose it's me being overcautious now, and is I don't want people to feel compelled to go and book themselves on a podcast. And for
Yeah.
doing that movie for me, mate, it was a kick in the nuts.
Mhm.
Like I would calculate 3 bad days leading up to a showing and 3 bad days after.
Mm.
So I went through 3 months of having probably 4 or 5 good days
Mm.
because I'd go 3 days leading up, fearful, sweaty, 1 day smiling, nodding, listening to stories, 3 days of recovery, 1 or 2 possible good days go again. Wednesday was normally a pretty good day.
Mm.
I just don't want people to put themselves in a position where they're benchmarking their recovery by someone like mine or yours. And I've been at this, I'm 62, I've been in active, determined recovery for 15 years, and I feel like I'm in a pretty good place. I don't want them to, I don't want some fella who's 45 who's just remembering he got anally raped at a scout camp to all of a sudden go on a podcast and then he ends up topping himself. I don't want that. But
Mm.
if part of his journey is the courage to reach out and talk to others, part of that speaking up is doing that, then absolutely. If it ends up doing a doc, fantastic, go for it. But just be self-aware enough to understand that there, as you said, brother, there is a risk and a cost. So count that cost before you do, and then plan for it, manage it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And along the lines of speaking out, you've shared with me the politicizing of this issue. And unfortunately, it's become one of the things you had shared with me was a gender political issue. And you touched on it right at the beginning, too. How have you navigated that? And do you feel like some of the work you've done or the people you've been involved with is changing that direction or even perspective around the political side of this?
I think the documentary was very important tool, even though it was wrapped in an assumption that more women were abused or trafficked than men, and that more men were traffickers than women.
Hmm.
That was the assumption. But the message that came across from that was there was a strong voice from a male individual who said, "Hey, listen, what about the rest of us?" And so that started to change in the conversation. And some of the stuff we did online got to the notice of the State Department in 2017. And for the first time, they mentioned in their report on human trafficking, the trafficking of boys and men. And so we were very pleased to see that some of our social work had been taken notice of. I, I, I suppose I'm a little bit of a crusader in some ways. And I try to be nice about it because I don't want to be a dick. But it's a little bit like I'm an a-hole, but not a dick, as Star-Lord said in Guardians of the Galaxy. I try my best not to be a dick, but I can be an a-hole.
Yeah.
I will push back in the politest ways, and normally with statistics. I have the statistics. I've armed myself with the statistics. And I'll just say, that's great, but that's not the case.
Mm.
And I'm surprised at how many in this season of podcasting of people I've talked to. And what's interesting is to find a man like yourself, obviously comfortable in who you are as a man and in your field, discussing these things. It's a rarity, brother. So, honestly, kudos to you.
I appreciate it.
A lot of the women I talk to, I got one lady, the majority of her clients are men. And she goes, "It's really funny in my practice, the majority of clients are men and they're all sexually abused." I said, "Yeah, that's because the numbers of men and women being sexually abused is the same,
Mm.
maybe more so." I said, "You go to any of the stands, Pakistan, Afghanistan, any of that site, you're talking 95%.
Yes.
She goes, "No, that's not true." I said, "I will send you the statistics out of 2024, 2025.
Mhm.
And the other thing is I find to push back on things like misnomers. We're comfortable with terms like toxic masculinity. We never talk about toxic femininity. And if we talk about toxic femininity, we wouldn't talk about that. But so we're putting these labels on behavior and wiping out whole groups of people.
Mm.
instead of trying to have these conversations that bring people together.
Yeah.
Dude, there's just toxic dicks everywhere, regardless of the gender. So it's fun again. I try hard, but I don't do well at it on occasion. I've got cultural Tourette's, mate. I'm Australian. I think sometimes it just gets away from me. You know what I mean? This
Yeah.
bloody pom, bloody English.
I appreciate the authenticity and which I want to come back to that piece. But just before we move on to that, where do you think change needs to happen moving forward based on what you're seeing now? I know you're touching on some very critical things, especially when things get put into the gender label and we box it up nicely and neatly and try to say, hey, keep this clean. But unfortunately, life isn't that way. Where do we need to move forward as a society in general to continue to have these dialogues and improve our understanding so we're not secluding a huge population of people that are also being impacted?
I don't know, mate. That's a tough one. Like, I think it comes up to fellas like yourself who've got a platform and an influence, and you've got a demeanor and a maturity about you that means you can engage within people,
Mm.
and not be threatened by the flack you're going to get accordingly. I'd actually do normally pretty good, but I get it to a point where it starts to, I feel like the attacks are becoming very personal because they sometimes do know my background. And I'll jettison myself from a conversation because I can feel it. I can feel it getting up into around 7 or 8 internally.
Yes.
And then I become ugly, Rosie O'Donnell ugly. I'm just going to throw some shit on it. So it's just not going to go well for me. And so I think it's having the courage to turn up with men like us, the courage to turn up and have conversations. Say, hang on, whoa. If that was said about your daughter, would you be comfortable with that?
Mm. Mm.
If you're going to say it to your son,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you should think about that, just as a thought for you. Oh,
Yeah.
hang on. What you're saying there, you're right. That's if the roles were reversed in what you said, wouldn't that come across as sexist?
Mm.
And I think we've got to have the courage to have those conversations. And unfortunately, our society has just decided we don't want to have one critical thinking or opposing conversations. It's okay. When did that happen to the human race? To clubs, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think I often remind people, and it's something I've learned from Brene Brown, so I'm not going to take the credit for it, but when I'm working with couples, especially, it's this reminder that, and I think it can apply to this conversation here too, but asking yourself, do I want to be right or do I want to get it right? And
That's very good, man.
when we shift to the latter, then that opens us up to listen more and talk less.
Yeah, that's very good, bro. That's very good. Yeah, I'll steal that. Brene Brown, forget it, man. I'm
Brene
not even
Brown.
mentioning you. I'm just stealing that. No, forget that. I'll give credit the first time, the second time. I had this great thought. Authentic is a thief as well, mate. Nothing new under the sun.
You can argue we're all thieves in a way because none of our ideas are actually original. It's all
Oh, bro, absolutely.
right. So coming back to the authenticity piece. So when you were talking about that midlife crisis that we term often,
Yeah.
but for you is more of a realignment and there was a piece of authenticity there. Are you able to expand on that a little bit?
Sure.
Like,
Sure, that's become a very important part of my. There's 2 very strong mantras I have, 4-step mantras, a total of 7 all up between these 2, that I try and live the guardrails for my life. And if I stay between them, it becomes very poignant for me. So the concept started back early in recovery when I was doing some thinking about this. And in our 20s, we're often told what to do, where to go, what school to go to, even what to dress, etc. Our 30s, we're involved in these relationships, is having kids, paying mortgages. In our 40s, we've got a little bit of time.
yeah.
And that's when this crisis, as some people say, but realignment is how I've come to see it happens. Either our world falls apart or we stop and we go, dude, what the am I doing? I'm going out every day to make money, to come home, and I would have more sex with a college roommate than with my wife. My kids hate me. She hates me. The dog won't even let me pat it anymore. So fuck this. I'm going to buy a convertible and try and find out. And I think what we're actually trying to say is I am so miserable with me, but because I've been trained that happiness happens externally, I go external to try and look at it. And when I flipped that switch and realized literally I went from John 1.0 to John 2.0 could not do the goal-driven timekeeping stuff that John 1.0 could do. He didn't even want to do it. John 2.0 had actually lost a series of skills neurologically that John 1.0 had.
Mm.
And I had to try and work out what the hell John 2.0 was actually good at or what he liked to do. And so when I did that, I thought, I've got to get to know this fella. I've got to like this fellow sincerely because I'm stuck with him for a long time. And that's when I started this process of attempting to live from the inside out, which meant I went through a lot of things being uncomfortable because I was living from the outside in and it felt icky.
Mm.
But that ickiness, because it's a therapeutic term, ickiness, scientifically backed by four international studies. This ickiness was just made me, and I didn't want whatever that, and I just realized whatever's doing this, I don't want to do that anymore. And so the reality, brother, is that I'm a very good liar. I lied to survive. And I lied telling people I liked what I was made to do, that the things that were done to me liked. I'd lie so I wouldn't get beaten or abused. So my whole life was built on a lie. And then later on, even when I became a Christian and I entered the ministry, I was still lying because I was engaged in things to make other people happy. I was doing things that were better for a congregation or for an organization than it was for John.
Mm.
So when the whole thing fell apart, I decided I wanted to rebuild myself
Mm.
with authenticity or integrity as at the
Mhm.
core of it.
Yeah.
But the challenge there is you have to know who you are if you're going to build true to yourself.
Yes.
And that's where the real work happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what I appreciate about some of the work Carl Jung has done. And there's something he says around, if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you. And that's when
Right.
we're getting the beatings.
Yes.
We can sit there and be the victim, or we can decide to really learn more about
Agreed.
who we are, right? And confront it.
So for me, it became authenticity is be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And then imagine a future that I wanted to inhabit, which was in my darkest hour. It's still something I find very difficult. And a lot of that's to do, I now understand neurologically, shutting down of the frontal lobe with ability to future think.
Mm.
So try and imagine a future I want to inhabit and set goals according to that. And then finally is live Susu. It's a Finnish word.
Yes.
It means white knuckle courage in the face of overwhelming odds, relentless resilience. Just hang on tight and fuck it all. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
So when I line those four up, I always start with, is this something I really want to do? And then is it going to serve where I'm going? Does it
Yeah.
align with my life? And then I just need to get after it.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I actually thought about you because I saw there's a movie on Netflix called Sisu.
Bro, that's where I got it from. Listen, I'm watching this old nasty guy who says nothing and just shoves daggers in people's heads. It's like, to my man, get that therapy from.
Yeah, so I'll be watching that. So when I saw that pop up the other day, I was like, oh, I wonder if John was referring to that.
Yes, he is. Date night movie. Tell her it's a date. It's a love story, brother. It is. Just trust me. Get a pizza, a bottle of red. It's a love story.
All right, I'll try that. I'll let you know how it goes. But
Please.
John, thank you so much for this conversation. I appreciate your vulnerability. I know it's what you do and live for, but still, I appreciate you coming on here and sharing that part of yourself with me and the audience, and really appreciate all the wisdom you shared today. And now for listeners that want to learn more about your work or the documentaries, I know you talked about the book, Deal With It. How can they find all of that? And what are some ways they can get in touch with you if they wanted to?
Yeah, please. Social, Dr. John A. King. Or if they go to my website, draking.com, there's a couple of things on the front page. The memoir is going to publishers at the moment. It's being re-released. So they can sign up for a book launch, and we'll be doing chats with the author in the next couple of months. There's some mental health quizzes, some performance stuff we do just to give them free feedback. And if they answer that, then I'll send them a biohacking trauma kit on the things that I've done for myself that really work. And then there's something called the Phoenix Challenge, which is a 7-week protocol they can have a look at to see if it helps them with our online community.
Awesome. We'll put all of that in the show notes, but John, thank you again. Really appreciate your time today.
I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.